There we go. What's going on? Oh. Hello, 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 hello. That's why.
This is the Spirit and Wellness Show. News and information from a higher perspective. Your host, Harry Wilkinson.
Hello, welcome to the Spirit and Wellness Show. My name is Harry Wilkinson, and this is the show where we take a look at the days and weeks, events, happenings in the world of politics, international news, media, technology, environment, all of the things that we hear about during the week, all of the things that ostensibly affect our lives in one way or another, and we take a step back and we look at it from a higher perspective. So if you're new to the show and you're wondering what does he mean by higher perspective, yes, there is an element of spirituality to what I talk about. Absolutely. It is not a religious perspective, but it is the concept that there is more to the truth of who and what we really are than what we see in the world, than what we physically can feel from what we are aware of at the lowest level of our consciousness, if you will. And that really is, if you're looking for a definition of what spirituality is, that's what spirituality is. It's the belief that there's something more than just the physical. So with that kind of definition of spirituality, you can see that it transcends religious thought, but's connected to it, which is why on this show, I'm constantly talking about the difference between religion and spirituality, almost ad nauseum, almost to a wearying degree, because there's still this insistence. There's still this conflation between spirituality and religion. The two are not the same. In fact, the two often work at cross purposes with each other. But don't get me started, because I'll be talking about this for the next 20 minutes, and I want to get on with the show. So, yes, from a higher perspective, it means we take a step back, and we look at the stories that we are creating on this level. My perspective is that from the highest level of our being, the truth of who we are, which goes beyond the physical, we are creating everything in the physical space that we play in. And I use the word play very deliberately because that's what we're doing. That's my belief. And you can think about it like you might think about The Matrix or other sci-fi types of stories where you have a virtual world in which there's an intelligence behind it that is playing within that field. However, that intelligence may or may not be aware that it's a game, or may be aware enough but is so taken in by the game that they forget the truth for a while. That's my perspective in a nutshell. That this is what we're doing. And we're doing it for a reason. We're doing it to have experiences, to have different, exciting things to do. Because at the highest level of our being, we are so powerful. We are beyond the kinds of things that give us sort of the day-to-day thrills or anxiety or excitement or fear that we go through. The idea of weakness, the idea of lack, the idea of I'm not good enough, I'm not strong enough, the idea of losing, the idea of winning. All of these things are things that at our highest level of being we are way beyond. But also being way beyond that, we miss out on sort of the kind of thrilling experiences that you can have when you sort of put yourself in a game environment and you put limitations on you. Right? So any game that you play, whether you're a gamer or you do video games or you play sports, right, there's a set of rules. You can't do this, you can do this. You're playing soccer, you can't use your hands. That's a limitation. Why? Just because it's part of the rules. You have hands. You could use them, and if you did use them, it would be a different game. But for the purposes of that game, no hands. You don't have them. We kind of do the same thing to ourselves or our lower selves, if you want to put it that way or look at it that way, or you can look at the self, the everyday self that we go through as a vehicle in which we express things, sometimes from our highest selves and sometimes not. You can think of it as an avatar, as a representative of who and what you are, but not the totality of who and what you are. And so when we deal with potentially toxic things, like the constant bombardment that we get through our media and our new technologies, things that are potentially toxic, and you've seen this. I know you've seen it. Buttons get pushed, people react in a crazy manner, firing off nasty tweets or posts on Facebook, and this triggers more and more anxiety and more more destructive states of mind, if you will. But if you can deal with it from that, and this is not to say that you actually really change much, except the way that you perceive it, and that makes all the difference in the world. Really. Because now you're not just reacting to things. Now you know that there's something else going on. And you can choose to actively participate in that, while being aware that it is not the truth, the ultimate truth of who and what we are. If you have a strong political belief, you can engage in that as part of this game, but also be aware that it is not the real truth. That other perspectives are also there, and though you might not agree with them, they actually have an equal validity to your point of view, because they are all just points of view and not real truth. Yeah, that's a heavy discussion which we could spend episode after episode and hours upon hours discussing, but I'm not going to do that because I want to continue with part 3 of our discussion that we've been having about the resurgence, if you will, although I don't think it ever really went away. But certainly from a scientific and research standpoint, the return of psychedelics and what that means, and what it's showing to people who may have had a difficult time understanding the concepts that, like I was just talking about, the concepts of being beyond the physical. People to whom that was just something not even thought about. It's curious to me, and maybe it's just because I'm the person that I am, that how anybody could not think about that or consider that. And we'll talk about it, particularly in the context of this particular book that we're talking about, which I'll be reading little bits and pieces of to you. It's this new book. The author's name is Michael Pollan, and he wrote this book. It's his new book on how to change your mind, where he talks about the history and the new research that is going on with psychedelics, and the new information that they are finding about what it does, how it helps people to overcome depression and anxiety and alcoholism and other things. But he also talks about his own personal experience with the drug and what he's found from that. The latest trend, from what I've heard, is that out there in Silicon Valley, some of these high-tech programmers are using low doses of LSD to help them. So, after years of this being this substance that people were terrified of, they were terrified of it because all of these stories were told about it. These horror stories about people going crazy and jumping out of, 6-story windows and all of this kind of thing. Most of these stories were not true, by the way. There were incidences of tragedies that happened, but very few actually happened, and most of them were not directly attributable to the psychedelics involved. So, getting past that fear of it and returning it to the status that it had before it became illegal, it was considered to be quite a step forward, and the possibilities that it was showing in the research that was done were quite promising. So now we've sort of returned to making use of that. The drug itself was introduced by a company called Sandoz Pharmaceuticals in the early 30s. They began doing experiments in the 60s, and then, of course, you probably are familiar with the name Timothy Leary, who famously encouraged students to use this drug to tune in and drop out, because it would change the way that they saw the world. And of course, throughout history, substances like this have been used for quite often spiritual experiences, sacrament, all of those